You know those moments when you stumble upon something that completely changes your life? Well, this was one of those. I was following an unmarked trail, pushing through thick underbrush, when I found myself at the mouth of a mysterious cavern. Something about it just called to me. Maybe it was the way the mist curled around the entrance, or the strange warmth emanating from within. As I ventured deeper, the natural light fading behind me, I noticed something peculiar. Carved symbols on the walls, unlike anything I'd ever seen. The cave tunnel twisted and turned until I came face to face with an enormous boulder, perfectly round, with 5 distinct markings on its surface. I don't know what possessed me, but I reached out and knocked 5 times. The sound echoed through the cave, and then silence. Just as I was about to turn back, the impossible happened. There, hidden from the outside world, was an entire village, but not just any village. This was the home of the Wumpies, 500 of the most remarkable people ever imagined. The Wumpies themselves, they were extraordinary. I watched in amazement as elderly residents, well into their 90s, scaled the cave walls with the agility of mountain goats. Everyone was incredibly fit, moving with a grace I'd never seen before. They showed me their self-sufficient community, vast underground gardens where they grew their own food, crystal clear underground springs providing fresh water, and a complex system of natural ventilation keeping the air pure and fresh. They explained that their society had remained hidden for centuries, and they couldn't risk their location becoming known to the outside world. So here I am, now a Wumpy myself. I've learned their ways, their secrets, their incredible methods of staying healthy and strong. My old life seems like a distant dream now. Sometimes I wonder if anyone from my past life misses me, but then I look around at my new family, at the magical world we inhabit, and I know I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. The most remarkable part, this story will never reach the outside world, unless, of course, you happen to find yourself in those Welsh woods, discover that hidden cavern, and know to knock exactly 5 times on that mysterious boulder. There was this tiny ant named Max, who lived in a bustling colony at the edge of a beautiful garden. Like all the other ants, Max's daily routine involved collecting food and bringing it back to the colony. But Max was different. He had always wondered what lay beyond their little corner of the garden. The grass seemed taller, the flowers unfamiliar, and before he knew it, he was completely lost. His heart raced as he scurried back and forth, trying to find any familiar landmarks. The sun was getting higher, and the ground was becoming uncomfortably hot beneath his tiny feet. Just when panic was about to set in, Max heard a gentle buzzing sound above him. Looking up, he saw a friendly-looking bee hovering nearby. The bee, whose name was Bumble, noticed the distressed ant and flew down to say hello. "You seem a bit lost, little friend," Bumble said with a warm smile. Max explained his situation, and Bumble's eyes lit up with an idea. "Why don't I give you a bird's eye view? Hop on my back, and we'll find your home together." At first, Max was terrified of flying. After all, ants weren't meant for the sky. But something about Bumble's kind demeanor gave him courage. With a deep breath, he climbed onto Bumble's fuzzy back and held on tight. What happened next was the most amazing experience of Max's life. The garden transformed into a magical landscape from above. They soared past rainbow-colored flowers, danced with butterflies, and watched dewdrops sparkle like diamonds in the morning sun. Not only did Bumble help Max find his way back home, but their adventure marked the beginning of a beautiful friendship. From that day on, Max would often meet Bumble for exciting flights around the garden, sharing stories and discovering new wonders together. Their friendship taught everyone in the garden that the most special connections can come from the most unexpected places, and Max, well, he was no longer just another ant in the colony. He was the ant who flew with the bees, proving that sometimes getting lost can lead you to exactly where you're meant to be. There's something extraordinary about her, the girl who whispers to water. Ever since she was little, she knew she was different. I remember the first time she told me about her gift. She heard whispers, sitting by the lake, soft and flowing, and she explained how water would dance around her, responding to her thoughts, her emotions, Raindrops would curve away from her path, creating an invisible umbrella. Puddles would part like tiny seas when she walked through them. It wasn't just parlor tricks. Water was her guardian, her eternal protector. One night, when she was 16, a burglar broke into her home. As he crept up the stairs, the pipes in the walls began to tremble. Before he could reach her bedroom, they burst, creating a barrier of rushing water that drove him away. The police found him later, soaked and shivering, babbling about impossible things. But the most remarkable story happened during the Great Flood of 2019. As the river swelled beyond its banks and the city descended into chaos, she stood calmly in the middle of it all. While others fled in panic, she raised her hands, and witnesses swear they saw the flood waters part around her neighborhood, sparing hundreds of homes from destruction. Some call it a miracle, others call it impossible, but those who know her, who've seen the way water bends and flows in her presence, understand that there are still mysteries in this world we can't explain. On rainy days, you might see her walking downtown, completely dry without an umbrella, a gentle smile on her face as the drops create a perfect dome above her head. They say water is life itself, and for her, it's more than that. It's a friend, a protector, a companion that's been with her since birth. Scientists have tried to study her, skeptics have tried to debunk her, but the truth remains as clear as a mountain stream. She is the water woman, and her story flows on like the endless rivers that have chosen to protect her. In a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable, she reminds us that sometimes the most beautiful relationships are the ones we never expected to find, even if it's with something as simple and extraordinary as water itself. Let me tell you about Kelly, a woman who made an extraordinary choice that puzzled everyone around her. One morning in her 20s, Kelly decided that her bed was the most comfortable place in the world, and she never left it again. You might think this is impossible, but Kelly managed to create an entire life within the confines of her queen-sized mattress. She had her meals delivered right to her bedside, balanced her laptop on her knees for work, and even celebrated holidays under her favorite floral duvet cover. What made Kelly's story even more fascinating was her sweet tooth. She had an impressive collection of candy wrappers hidden between her sheets, and her knit stand was basically a miniature candy shop. Chocolate bars, gummy bears, and lollipops. They were her constant companions through the decades. People would often ask, "Kelly, don't you want to see the world?" She'd just smile and say, "My bed is my world." She had her groceries delivered, conducted business meetings via video calls, and even maintained friendships, all from the comfort of her beloved bed. The most incredible part, Kelly lived to be 999 years old. Also, the legend goes, never once setting foot on the ground. The same bed that she chose at fateful morning stayed with her throughout her entire life. Sure, she changed the sheets and mattress occasionally. She wasn't completely unreasonable. Doctors were baffled by her longevity, especially considering her sedentary lifestyle and candy addiction. Some speculated that maybe it was her complete lack of stress. After all, what could be more relaxing than spending your entire life in bed? You might wonder about practical matters. Yes, she had everything figured out. A special setup for personal hygiene, exercise routines she could do lying down, and even a small garden on her windowsill that she could tend to from bed. The most remarkable thing about Kelly wasn't just her unusual lifestyle choice. It was how she turned what most would consider a limitation into a full, rich life. She wrote books, started an online business, and even found love with someone who didn't mind having every date in bed. Of course, Kelly's story became legendary in her town, and people would often visit just to catch a glimpse of the woman who lived her entire life in bed. She became known as the bedroom philosopher, sharing wisdom from her unique perspective on life. So next time you're having a lazy day in bed, remember Kelly, the woman who took the concept of a duvet day to an entirely new level, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary lives can be lived in the most ordinary places. Picture this, in the heart of Azerbaijan, where the mountains meet the Caspian Sea, there lived a legend, a man whose name would be whispered in alleyways and celebrated in town squares, Quemington Jones. They say he first appeared on a stormy night in Baku, when a gang of notorious thieves had taken hostages at the city's most prestigious bank. The police were helpless, the situation desperate. Then, like a shadow in the night, Jones emerged. The stories of what happened at night vary, but all agree on one thing. When dawn broke, 20 criminals were unconscious, the hostages were safe, and Jones stood there, not a scratch on him. That's when the rumors began. Some swore they saw bullets bounce off his chest like raindrops. Others claimed his fists made sounds like clashing metal when he fought. His hands are made of steel, they'd say, forged in some secret mountain monastery. Whether true or not, these tales only added to his mystique. For 5 incredible years, Quemington Jones became Azerbaijan's guardian angel. He stopped terror plots in Ganja, rescued children from trafficking rings in Sumkayat, and even prevented an assassination attempt on a visiting diplomat. The criminal underworld learned to fear the very mention of his name. But what made Jones truly remarkable wasn't his seemingly superhuman abilities. It was his humanity. He'd spend hours talking to troubled youth, helping elderly cross streets, and supporting local communities. He wasn't just fighting crime, he was fighting hopelessness. Then came that fateful night in December. Jones rushed in, saving family after family. Witnesses say he made 12 trips into the inferno. On the 13th, he never came out. They searched for weeks. Some say he perished in the flames. Others believe he retired quietly, his work done. But most Azerbaijanis will tell you something different. They believe Jones is still out there, watching, protecting, waiting for when he's needed most. To this day, parents tell their children about Quemington Jones, the crime fighter with fists of steel and a heart of gold. And on quiet nights, when the wind whistles through Baku's streets, some still claim to see a familiar silhouette on the rooftops, standing guard over the city he loved. After all, heroes like Quemington Jones never truly disappear. They just become legends. You know what's crazy? I lost my phone last week, but not in the usual way people lose their phones. I didn't leave it in a cab or have it stolen. My phone literally fell through time. I know it sounds impossible, but hear me out. I was walking near this ancient pond in our local park, taking photos of the sunset. As I leaned over to get a better angle, my phone slipped from my hands. I expected to hear a splash, to see it sink to the bottom, but instead, there was this strange shimmer in the water, like ripples moving backward. And just like that, my phone vanished. Now, here's where it gets wild. 3 days later, my wife got a call from an unknown number. When she answered, the voice on the other end spoke in what sounded like ancient dialect. After several confused exchanges, we realized we were talking to people from 1,000 years in the past. My phone had somehow fallen through a temporal portal in that pond. Through broken conversations and lots of patience, we learned that the local villagers had found my phone. At first, they thought it was some kind of divine artifact. Can you imagine their faces when they figured out how to unlock it? They discovered videos of airplanes, cars, and modern cities. They found my Spotify playlist with the electronic music and rock bands. They started exploring the internet. Thankfully, somehow the connection worked across time. Their minds were blown by Wikipedia. They called it the Oracle of Endless Knowledge. My photo gallery became their window into our world, and they spent hours swiping through pictures of supermarkets, skyscrapers, and shopping malls. The most surreal part, we established regular call times. We'd talk about their daily life, and they'd ask endless questions about our technology. They kept the phone hidden from their leaders, fearing it would be seen as witchcraft. But in secret, this small group of villagers became historians of the future. One day, the calls suddenly stopped. Maybe the battery finally died, or perhaps the temporal connection closed. But for those few weeks, my lost phone created an impossible bridge between two worlds, teaching me that sometimes the most extraordinary stories can start with a simple accident. You know what's funny? I never even filed an insurance claim. How exactly do you explain that your phone wasn't damaged or stolen, but is currently being used by people from a millennium ago? Some things are better left unexplained, I guess. Let me tell you about something that happened to me last summer. You know how they say be careful what you wish for? Well, I learned that lesson the hard way. I was at rock bottom, lost my job, my girlfriend left me, and I was about to lose my apartment. One night, scrolling through social media, seeing everyone's perfect lives, I muttered to myself, I'd do anything to have it all. That's when I first noticed the scratching sound coming from my closet. Not like a mouse or anything, more deliberate, almost like someone drawing their nails across the wall. I ignored it at first, but it kept getting louder. Then came the whispers. A voice, smooth as silk, promising everything I ever wanted. Success, love, money, all mine for the taking. Just had to sign a little agreement, it said. Nothing major, just my eventual companionship. I know what you're thinking. Only an idiot would make a deal with what was clearly a demon. But when you're desperate enough, when everything you've ever wanted is dangling right in front of you, well, let's just say the pen felt awfully good in my hand. And you know what? Everything did change. Within months, I had a 6-figure job, a gorgeous penthouse, and people practically throwing themselves at me. Life was perfect. But then I started noticing things. The people around me having horrible accidents, competitors at work mysteriously disappearing, anyone who wronged me ending up in terrible situations. I wasn't controlling it, but it was happening because of me. The worst part, I started enjoying it. That's what the demon really wanted. Not my soul, but to transform me into something like it, to make me relish in others' misfortune, to feed off their pain. Here's the twist though. There never was any demon in my closet. No physical creature, no contract signed in blood. The demon was inside me all along, my darkest desires just waiting for permission to come out. That voice, my own consciousness justifying every terrible thing was about to do. And now, well, let's just say I'm the one whispering to others from their closets. After all, misery loves company, and there are so many desperate people out there just waiting to make a deal. So next time you're alone at night, and you hear that scratching from your closet, ask yourself, is it really a demon you're hearing? Or is it just the sound of your own desires trying to break free? Whatever you do, don't answer. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. You know, I need to tell you about something that's been haunting me for months. It started on an ordinary Tuesday at my office building. Nothing special about that day. Just another morning coffee and spreadsheet kind of day. I went to use the restroom on the 3rd floor, the quiet one that hardly anyone uses. As I'm sitting there in cubicle number 4, this friendly voice from next door says, "Hey there, how's your day going?" At first, I thought nothing of it. I mean, weird timing for small talk. But whatever, I politely responded, and we had this oddly pleasant conversation. But when I left, every cubicle was empty. Every single one. A week later, same thing. Different conversation, same friendly voice. Got any weekend plans? It asked. Again, empty bathroom when I checked. This kept happening, week after week. Sometimes the voice would ask about my family, my job, even remembered details from our previous conversations. I started using different bathrooms, different floors, but somehow, it found me. The voice became more persistent. Why are you avoiding me? It would ask. Don't you like our talks anymore? Last week, things got really strange. The voice started telling me things about myself that I never mentioned. It knew about the scar on my left knee from when I was 7. It knew about the fight I had with my sister last Christmas. Things no stranger could possibly know. Yesterday, the voice said something that chilled me to my bones. Soon we won't need these walls between us anymore. Soon we'll be proper friends. I'm writing this on toilet paper because my phone won't work in here. If you're reading this, I need you to know. I think I hear footsteps coming, but they're not from the floor. They're coming from inside the walls. The voice is getting closer, and it's not coming from the next cubicle anymore. It's coming from everywhere. They never found him after that. Just this note. written in shaky handwriting on a piece of toilet paper. Some say late at night, if you use that third-floor bathroom, you might hear two voices now, having the friendliest conversation you've ever heard. Have you ever wished you could read minds? Well, let me tell you about Sarah, who had that exact ability, but with a dark twist. She could only read people's thoughts when they were angry, when their minds were filled with rage and darkness. At first, it seemed like an incredible gift. Sarah could sense when her co-worker was about to explode at a meeting, when a stranger on the street was going to harass someone, or when a friend was bottling up resentment. She thought she could use this power to help people, to prevent conflicts before they happened. But as days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, Sarah's gift began to feel more like a curse. Every angry thought, every dark intention, every cruel plan, they all poured into her mind uninvited. She would walk down the street and suddenly be hit with waves of rage from a jealous spouse plotting revenge. She'd be sitting in a cafe and feel the burning hatred of someone planning to hurt their boss. The weight of carrying all these negative thoughts became unbearable. Sarah started avoiding crowded places, knowing that in any group of people, there would always be someone harboring angry thoughts. She couldn't sleep at night, haunted by the violent intentions she'd witnessed during the day. What made it worse was that she could never turn it off. While others could choose to walk away from conflict, Sarah was forced to experience every moment of hatred, every flash of rage, every violent impulse within a certain radius of her. It was like being trapped in a constant storm of other people's darkness. The final straw came when she read the thoughts of a seemingly normal neighbor, only to discover their plans for something truly horrific. She reported it to the authorities, but how could she explain how she knew? Who would believe her? The burden of knowing, but not always being able to act became too much. Sarah's story makes us wonder, sometimes, not knowing what others think might be a blessing in disguise. After all, we're all capable of dark thoughts in our worst moments. Perhaps the real gift isn't in reading minds, but in choosing to see the best in people, even when we suspect the worst. On a crisp autumn evening in 1955, millions of Americans gathered around their television sets, eagerly awaiting the premiere of what promised to be the next big variety show. John Stevens, a charismatic TV presenter known for his dazzling smile and quick wit, stood center stage at the WXTV studio in New York City. The studio lights were bright, the cameras were rolling, and the live audience was buzzing with excitement. John, dressed in his signature navy blue suit, began his opening monologue with his usual charm. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," he said, flashing that famous smile. "Tonight, we're about to embark on something spectacular ... double quotes. Little did anyone know just how spectacular and terrifying the evening would become. 15 minutes into the show, John was performing a seemingly routine segment, interviewing a local musician. Then, something inexplicable happened. As he walked across the stage, there was a brief flicker of the studio lights. In that split second, John Stevens simply ... vanished. The audience gasped. The cameramen looked at each other in confusion. The producer in the control room frantically switched between camera angles, but John was nowhere to be seen. The broadcast was quickly cut off, with the station citing technical difficulties. The next day, newspapers ran wild with speculation. Some claimed it was an elaborate publicity stunt or a magic trick gone wrong. Others whispered about government conspiracies and supernatural phenomena. The network executives held press conferences, offering vague explanations about technical malfunctions and lighting issues. But John Stevens was never seen again. No body was found. No trace of his whereabouts ever surfaced. His bank accounts remained untouched. His car was still parked in the studio lot. It was as if he had simply ceased to exist. The police investigation turned up nothing. His family searched 4 years, hiring private investigators and following countless leads, all to no avail. Some witnesses from the studio audience that night swore they saw a strange blue light just before he disappeared. Others claimed they heard an odd humming sound. As the years passed, the incident was gradually forgotten by the public, filed away as one of television's greatest unsolved mysteries. The network buried the footage deep in their archives, and the show never aired again. Today, more than 6 decades later, the question remains, what really happened to John Stevens on that fateful night? Did he somehow slip through a crack in reality? Was he the victim of some cosmic anomaly? Or was there a more sinister explanation? The truth about his disappearance remains one of television's darkest secrets, a chilling reminder that sometimes people can vanish without a trace, even in front of millions of watching eyes. Let me tell you about something extraordinary that happened in our town. A tale that still gives me goosebumps every time I think about it. You know that old Victorian house on Jones Street? The one that's been abandoned for decades, with its peeling paint and creaky shutters? Well, last summer, my friends and I were feeling particularly adventurous, against our better judgment, and definitely against our parents' wishes. We decided to explore it. The front door was hanging off its hinges, practically inviting us in. The inside was exactly what you'd expect from a house that's been empty for years. Dust everywhere, cobwebs in every corner, and that musty smell that old houses get. But it was when we went upstairs that things got weird. In the bathroom, there was this ancient tin bath. You know, one of those old-fashioned ones with the claw feet. It still had water in it, which was strange enough, but what we saw in that water I still can't believe it. At first, we thought we were hallucinating. In the murky water, there was an entire battlefield, and I mean an entire battlefield, in miniature. Tiny soldiers, no bigger than your thumb, were engaged in what looked like a 19th century battle. There were cavalry charges, infantry formations, and even tiny cannons firing actual miniature smoke. The soldiers wore red coats and blue uniforms, fighting with such intensity that the water rippled with their movements. We could hear their tiny battle cries and the clash of their microscopic weapons. It was like watching history through a window to another dimension. The strangest part, these weren't toys. These were living, breathing soldiers, fighting a battle from 2 centuries ago, somehow trapped in time and space within this old bathtub. We watched, mesmerized, as generals commanded their troops, horses galloped through the water, and flags waved in a breeze we couldn't feel. We tried to figure out how this was possible. Was this bath some kind of portal? Had the house somehow captured a moment in time? Or maybe, just maybe, this was where parallel universes intersected, where the membrane between our world and another was thin enough to see through. We returned several times after that, each visit revealing new details of the endless battle. Sometimes the blue coats would advance, sometimes the red coats would gain ground, but the battle never seemed to end. It was like watching a slice of history stuck in an infinite loop. To this day, the house still stands, and I sometimes wonder if that mysterious battle is still raging in that old tin bath. We never told anyone else about what we saw, who would believe us, but sometimes, when I pass by that house, I swear I can hear the faintest echo of drums and the miniature roar of tiny cannons, still fighting their eternal war in a forgotten bathroom down the street. Have you ever stared into the depths of your morning coffee and seen something strange? Let me tell you about Sarah Chen, a perfectly ordinary graduate student who did exactly that one foggy Tuesday morning. She was exhausted from pulling an all-nighter, mindlessly stirring her tea, when something caught her eye. At first, she thought it was just the way the light hit the liquid, creating odd patterns. But then she saw it, tiny lights, like stars, twinkling in her cup. Sarah leaned closer, her nose almost touching the surface. That's when reality shifted. The lights weren't random at all. They were windows, thousands of them, belonging to towering structures that shouldn't exist in a cup of tea. As her eyes adjusted, she began to make out more details. Streets winding between crystalline buildings, vehicles no bigger than dust motes zipping through the air, and people. Tiny, microscopic people going about their lives, completely unaware they existed inside someone's drink. She watched, transfixed, as their civilization flourished before her eyes. They had technology far beyond our understanding, harnessing the very energy of the tea's heat to power their cities. Their architecture defied physics, spiraling up in impossible patterns that seemed to dance with the ripples of the liquid. But then Sarah noticed something disturbing. Every time she moved the cup, massive waves would crash through their world. What seemed like gentle ripples to her were devastating tsunamis to them. Her simple act of stirring had probably destroyed entire neighborhoods. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah became obsessed. She stopped attending classes, spent hours watching this microscopic civilization evolve. She noticed they were building something, a massive device that reached toward the surface of their liquid sky. One morning, she arrived at her desk to find the tea completely still. The civilization had vanished without a trace, but there was something new, a message written in tiny bubbles on the surface. "Thank you for watching over us. Now it's our turn to watch over you." Sarah hasn't been seen since that day, but sometimes, when people look into their cups of coffee or tea, they swear they can see her face reflected back at them. Now part of another world, another civilization, trapped in an endless cycle of cups within cups within cups. So the next time you're about to take a sip of your drink, take a moment to look carefully, really carefully, because you never know. You might just be about to swallow an entire universe. And remember, that uneasy feeling you get when you stare too long into your cup, maybe it's not just your imagination. Maybe, just maybe, something is staring back. You know, there's something I need to get off my chest. Something that's been haunting me ever since I moved near Cherrywood. At first, it seemed like any other forest, peaceful, serene, with cherry blossoms dancing in the spring breeze. But there's more to this place than meets the eye. It started with whispers. Local folks would warn their kids not to venture too deep into Cherrywood, especially when alone. I thought it was just typical small-town superstition, you know, but then I experienced it myself. I remember that evening like it was yesterday. The sun was setting, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples. I was taking my usual evening walk, snapping photos of the cherry trees. That's when I felt it. This inexplicable chill creeping up my spine. At first, I tried to rationalize it. It's just the evening breeze, I told myself. But then I heard the footsteps. Soft, deliberate steps crunching on fallen leaves behind me. Every time I stopped, they stopped. Every time I moved, they followed. The locals call it the Cherrywood ghost. They say it only appears to people who are completely alone. It never shows itself. It just follows, closer and closer, until you can feel its cold breath on your neck. Some say it's the spirit of a young woman who lost her way in the woods decades ago. Others believe it's something far more ancient, something that's been there since before the cherry trees took root. But no one really knows for sure. What I do know is this: whenever I'm in Cherrywood now, I'm never truly alone. There's always that presence, that feeling of being watched, followed, hunted. The ghost never reveals itself, never makes contact. It just follows. Always following, always just a few steps behind. And the most terrifying part, sometimes, even when I'm home, safe behind locked doors, I still hear those footsteps, still feel that presence lurking just behind me. Because once the Cherrywood ghost chooses you, it never really lets you go. So if you ever find yourself near Cherrywood, remember this warning: don't go alone. And if you do don't look back, because you might just catch a glimpse of what's been following you all along. Let me tell you about the Ralph family, a tale that still sends shivers down my spine. In 1948, on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday morning, Harold Ralph locked the front door of his Victorian mansion in rural Massachusetts. Little did the world know, that click of the lock would echo through 3 generations. The Ralphs, Harold, his wife Eleanor, their 2 children, and Harold's elderly mother, simply disappeared. Well, not exactly disappeared. They were there, all right, hidden behind those thick velvet curtains and weathered brick walls. You see, Harold had become convinced that the outside world was being invaded by what he called soul stealers, beings that could replace humans with exact copies, leaving only subtle differences that he claimed he could detect. His paranoia became the family's prison, and soon, their normal. The children, Thomas and Marie, grew up never feeling grass between their toes or wind on their faces. They were educated through their father's extensive library, learning about a world they'd never experienced. Eleanor maintained an indoor garden in the conservatory, growing what food she could under artificial lights. They had enough stored supplies and old family wealth to sustain their isolation. The truly unsettling part, they began to develop their own peculiar habits and rituals. They would only speak in whispers after sunset. Convinced that they were listening, they created their own language of taps and knocks to communicate between rooms. The children grew up and had their own children, all within those walls. When authorities finally discovered them in 2023, after the house's utilities had gone unpaid 4 months, they found 3 generations of Ralphs, pale as moonlight, with their own complex society and beliefs. The youngest ones had never seen the sky, believing it to be a myth like dragons or unicorns. But here's the twist that makes this story truly haunting. When they were finally rescued, all 15 family members begged to be allowed to return to their self-imposed prison. They insisted that we were all the imposters they had been hiding from all along. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder, what if Harold Ralph saw something real that day in 1948? What if we're the ones living in the true prison, and the Ralphs ... were the ones who stayed free? The house still stands there, empty now, but if you listen carefully on quiet nights, you might hear the familiar pattern of taps and knocks, a family's secret language echoing through time, warning us about something we still don't understand. One Tuesday morning, at exactly 7:01 a.m., everyone on Earth woke up with a cat for a head. Not a mask, not a metaphor, an actual, living, blinking, yawning, meowing cat head. Doctors were confused, scientists threw their clipboards, news anchors tried to report the story, but kept accidentally coughing up hairballs mid-sentence. Nobody knew why it happened. There was no warning, no explosion, no curse. One moment, normal humans. Next moment, cat-face chaos. But what was stranger than the transformation was how fast everyone adapted. By lunchtime, office workers were swatting at laser pointers during meetings. Taxi drivers refused to move unless someone scratched behind their ears. Baristas purred when they got good tips. Politicians held press conferences and knocked microphones off the podium for fun. School children began chasing each other in circles and hissing during pop quizzes. And don't even ask about dating apps. It was 95% close-up cat selfies and bios like full-time tabby, part-time philosopher. Let's knock some glasses off tables together. But not everyone was thrilled. Gregory Farnsworth, a former dentist from Ohio, hated being a cat. He missed brushing his teeth. He missed chewing gum. He missed not shedding. He tried everything to reverse it. Hot showers, cold showers, reading Garfield backwards. One night, he even stood on his roof during a thunderstorm and yelled, "Who did this to us?" But the only reply was his neighbor Karen, licking her paw and shouting, "Shut up, Greg, I'm trying to groom." Meanwhile, in Sweden, a scientist named Dr. Clem Mjosteen claimed the phenomenon was caused by interdimensional feline interference. He presented a detailed theory involving ancient space cats, gravitational fuzz storms, and a portal shaped like a scratching post. No one understood it, but he wore a lab coat and had an especially fluffy head, so people believed him. By month 3, the world had changed entirely. Toilets had to be redesigned for balance. Hair salons rebranded as fur salons. Amazon introduced Prime Pounds, a drone service that drops cardboard boxes in random places so people could sit in them for no reason. But the strangest change came when people started communicating differently, not with words, but with meows. Some meows were happy, some meows were sad, some meows just meant, "I want tuna," an existential reassurance. It became a kind of language, and over time, it made things better. Arguments got shorter, wars stopped, mostly because no one wanted to fight with a head that instinctively chased butterflies mid-conflict. People became gentler, slower, sleepier, and honestly, cuter. Gregory still resisted. He refused to purr, refused to chase string, refused to admit that his reflection was, in fact, majestic. But then one morning, something inside him shifted. He saw a bird outside his window, and he didn't think, he just leapt. Mid-air, tail twitching, for gleaming in the sunlight, he realized, this isn't a curse, this is who I am now. And he landed with all the grace of a slightly overweight house cat who's never jumped before. He limped for 3 weeks, but emotionally, he soared. Years passed. People never turned back. Eventually, entire generations were born with cat heads and never knew anything else. They built a society of nap zones, gentle eye contact, and the occasional hissy fit over who sat in whose sunbeam. In history books, the transformation became known as the Great Purge, and nobody really missed their human faces, because as it turns out, life is simpler when everyone accepts they are a little strange, a little furry, and totally okay with knocking stuff off shelves for no reason at all. The end. No explanation, no solution, just cat heads forever. And honestly, it kind of worked out. They say every town has that person, the one nobody quite understands. In our town, his name was Victor Frost. Yes, that was his real name. And no, you couldn't make it up if you tried. Victor didn't live in a house like the rest of us. He didn't rent an apartment, or sleep in a van, or even live in a tent. No, Victor bought a giant industrial walk-in freezer from a restaurant supply auction, and moved in. He sold his car to pay for it, quit his job at the library, bought thermal socks by the dozen and a parka that could survive a blizzard on Mars. Then one day, he just, no bills. No heating, no TV. Only ice, frozen peas, and silence. At first, people thought it was a joke, a dare, maybe, but weeks passed, then months. And Victor, he was still in there. They'd see the faint glow of a battery-powered lantern through the frosty window. And if you listen closely, you might hear opera music echoing softly from inside. He said it made the ice feel more romantic. He was strange, sure, but polite. He once invited the mailman in for tea, which he served ice cold, of course, with frozen biscuits. He claimed the cold made him feel more alive, that warmth was a distraction from truth. He said people hide in comfort, but ice shows you who you really are. We laughed about it, called him the ice monk, the frost hermit, Mr. Popsicle. But he didn't care. He had his freezer, his peace, his rituals. Every morning, he did slow stretches in -20 degrees, wearing only wool shorts and boots. He meditated by the icebox. He journaled on frozen napkins, with a pen dipped in ink kept in a jar of slush. And then one day, the light stopped glowing. No music. No tea. No strange Victor sightings. A week passed. Someone called the police, and they opened the freezer. Inside, they found him sitting cross-legged in the middle of the room, wrapped in layers of blankets, surrounded by empty notebooks and icicles that hung from the ceiling like glass teeth. Victor Frost had frozen solid, peaceful, still, a faint smile on his face. No sign of struggle. No fear. Just a man who finally became one with the cold. They tried to thaw him for a proper burial, but something strange happened. His body refused to melt. Doctors couldn't explain it. Experts were baffled. Eventually, they gave up. His freezer was sealed, bolted shut, and placed in a quiet corner of the storage yard. And that's where he remains, perfectly preserved, like a strange monument to a man who chose stillness over speed, solitude over noise, ice over fire. Some say, if you go there at night, you can still hear faint opera music and feel a sudden chill in the air, as if the freezer door opened. Just a crack. They say Victor Frost didn't die. He just finished becoming what he always was, cold. And completely, unapologetically, himself.
In the winding roads of Wales there lived a man named Jake, who lived for the thrill of his motorcycle, the wind in his face, the roar of the engine, It was his everything. He'd spend his weekends challenging anyone brave enough to race him, pulling wheelies that made onlookers gasp, and pushing his bike to its limits. One misty morning, Jake was doing what he loved best, racing through his favorite tunnel in the Welsh countryside. The familiar echo of his engine bounced off the walls, but something felt different. The tunnel seemed longer than usual, darkness deeper, more intense. When he finally emerged into the light, Jake knew immediately that something was terribly wrong. The landscape wasn't the lush green hills of Wales. It was something entirely different. Before he could process what he was seeing, sirens blared, and he found himself surrounded by what looked like police officers. But their uniforms were unlike anything he'd ever seen. "Step away from the weapon." One of them commanded. Jake was bewildered. "Weapon? This is just my motorcycle." The officer's face grew stern. "Motorcycles have been outlawed here in Cretania for over a century. How dare you bring such a dangerous device into our realm?" Jake's mind was spinning. Cretania? But ... how are you speaking English? And why do you look human? The officer let out a knowing laugh that sent chills down Jake's spine. "Look human? You're the one who looks Cretanian. Every school child here knows we seeded Earth Planet 4367, your primitive world, eons ago. But what I want to know is how you managed to cross the dimensional barrier." I just rode through a tunnel," Jake stammered. "I need to get back home." The officer's expression turned grim. "I'm afraid that won't be possible. Bringing forbidden weapons into Cretania carries a minimum sentence of 40 years. Rules are rules." Back on Earth, Jake's disappearance became a local legend. People would drive past that mysterious tunnel, laying flowers at its entrance, wondering what happened to the motorcycle enthusiast who vanished without a trace. Some claimed they could hear the distant sound of a motorcycle engine on quiet nights, echoing from somewhere beyond our world. Years passed, and while theories circulated about Jake's fate, no one ever discovered the truth about the tunnel that led to Cretania, or the man who accidentally crossed between worlds on a morning ride that changed his life forever. Some say on particularly foggy mornings, you can still see tire tracks leading into that tunnel, ... but none coming out.
Sir John Treffry, Knight of the Battlefield. Warrior of legend, born of Cornwall and forged in war, he stood not just with sword and shield but with destiny in his veins. In the year 1356, at the Battle of Poitiers, he carved his name into the stone of history. The French king stood proud with thousands at his back. The Oriflamme, sacred banner of France, rose above the chaos. It was the symbol of death, a vow that no mercy would be given. But Sir John Treffry did not flinch. He rode into the storm. Steel clashed, blood spilled, and through the roaring fury of men and horses, he reached the banner. With a cry that silenced the field, he struck down its bearer. He tore the flag from French hands, and he raised it high. The flag of the French king, seized in battle by an English knight. Fear rippled through the French ranks. Even their king was captured that day, and they said this where Treffry rode. Kings fell, but that was not the end of his legend. It is said the Black Prince, Edward of Woodstock, bore a child in secret, a son born in Aquitaine, a child he could not claim, but could not leave behind. He gave the child to the one man he trusted, Sir John Treffry, and so he took the boy, raised him in honour, as a Treffry has blood of his blood. It is whispered that the line of Treffry holds royal blood, Plantagenet blood, the blood of kings. Sir John became more than a knight. He became the shield of the prince, his sword in battle, his whisper in war. The Black Prince was feared across Europe. but it was Treff Fry who made him feared. The French called him the Black Falcon. The English called him the Lion of Poitiers. To this day, the family name lives. Strong, unyielding, noble, Sir John Treff Fry, the knight who took the king's flag, the warrior who raised a royal son, the man who shaped empires and walked beside princes, a legend, a ghost, a flame that still burns. Sir John Treff Fry, remember the name. Dame Elizabeth Treff Fry stood at the battlements of Place House in Foy, Cornwall, a woman of steel in a time of iron men. It was the early 15th century, amid the turbulence of the 100 Years' War, when French raiders, emboldened by the chaos in England, turned their sails toward the Cornish coast. They expected an easy conquest. Instead, they met Dame Treff Fry as the invaders stormed the shoreline, scaling the cliffs and pressing toward the fortified family seat of the Treff Frys. It was not a garrison of soldiers that turned them back, but a determined woman with molten lead in her hands and defiance in her heart. From high above the entrance to Place House, Dame Elizabeth melted down lead and poured it onto the attackers below, an improvised and ruthless tactic that turned the tide. The French fled under the blistering onslaught. Historians agree this is one of the earliest recorded instances of molten lead being used in such a fashion to defend a stronghold, while it would become a trope in war, drama, and cinema for centuries to come. Its origins trace back to this singular moment, one woman, standing alone against invaders, defending not just a home, but a town. She wasn't a soldier. She wasn't trained for war. She was a Cornish gentlewoman. But in that moment, Dame Treff Fry embodied everything it meant to be a protector of land, family, and legacy. Place House, perched at the water's edge in Foy, was more than a home. It was a bulwark, and under Elizabeth's command, it became legend. Born into a family of status and influence, Elizabeth Treff Fry's lineage was tied to the land and people of Cornwall. Her name would be woven into local memory not just as a lady of the manor, but as a hero who stood when others might have yielded. Though history often forgets the contributions of women in war, Dame Elizabeth Treff Fry stands as an exception, a blazing figure in the dark. She was not just the lady of Place House, she was its fortress, and for generations to come, when invaders thought to test Cornish resolve, they would hear the tale of the woman who wielded molten lead. Dame Elizabeth Treff Fry, defender of Foy, a sentinel in silk and steel.
In the crisp morning air over NATO airspace, Captain James Stevens piloted his Eurofighter Typhoon on what seemed like just another routine patrol. The state-of-the-art fighter jet hummed beneath him, fully loaded with the latest military technology. The Aurora Borealis painted the sky in its usual ethereal dance, but something is different today. "Command, are you seeing this?" James radioed in, watching as the green shimmer intensified to an almost blinding level. The Aurora. It's not normal. His heart raced as the light enveloped his aircraft. Those were his last words before everything went white. When his vision cleared, James found himself in a completely different world. The peaceful morning sky had transformed into a war-torn horizon. Below him, a World War II battleship cut through the dark waters. "This can't be real," he whispered. But the Empire streaming past his cockpit was very real indeed. German voices crackled through his radio. Old-style transmissions that belonged in a museum, not in his modern cockpit. His ship below intensified its barrage, and suddenly, ping! A shell grazed his aircraft. "Too close," James muttered, instinctively maneuvering the Typhoon into evasive action. With modern targeting systems, it took just one precise strike to send the Nazi vessel to the depths. As James watched the ship sink, a sobering thought hit him. With this technology, I could end this war in weeks, But he knew better. The weight of history and its delicate balance pressed heavy on his mind. What happened next became the stuff of legend. They say Captain James Stevens did something extraordinary. He landed at an RAF base and surrendered himself, bringing with him knowledge that would prove invaluable. He shared carefully selected information about the war's progression, helping to save countless lives while preserving the timeline's integrity. But perhaps the most intriguing part of this tale. Look closely at today's Eurofighter Typhoon. Some whisper that its advanced features seem almost too ahead of their time. Could it be that the modern fighter jet's design was influenced by reverse engineering of itself? We may never know the truth, but whenever pilots see unusual lights in the aurora borealis, they remember the strange tale of Captain James Stevens, the man who took the long way home through time. In the winding roads of Wales there lived a man named Jake, who lived for the thrill of his motorcycle. The wind in his face, the roar of the engine. It was his everything. He'd spend his weekends challenging anyone brave enough to race him, pulling wheelies that made onlookers gasp, and pushing his bike to its limits. One misty morning, Jake was doing what he loved best, racing through his favorite tunnel in the Welsh countryside. The familiar echo of his engine bounced off the walls, but something felt different. The tunnel seemed longer than usual, darkness deeper, more intense. When he finally emerged into the light, Jake knew immediately that something was terribly wrong. The landscape wasn't the lush green hills of Wales. It was something entirely different. Before he could process what he was seeing, sirens blared, and he found himself surrounded by what looked like police officers. But their uniforms were unlike anything he'd ever seen. "Step away from the weapon," one of them commanded. Jake was bewildered. "Weapon? This is just my motorcycle." The officer's face grew stern. "Motorcycles have been outlawed here in Cretania for over a century. How dare you bring such a dangerous device into our realm?" Jake's mind was spinning. Cretania? But how are you speaking English? And why do you look human? The officer let out a knowing laugh that sent chills down Jake's spine. "Look human? You're the one who looks Cretanian. Every school child here knows we seeded Earth Planet 4367, your primitive world, eons ago. But what I want to know is how you managed to cross the dimensional barrier." I just rode through a tunnel," Jake stammered. "I need to get back home." The officer's expression turned grim. "I'm afraid that won't be possible. Bringing forbidden weapons into Cretania carries a minimum sentence of 40 years. Rules are rules." Back on Earth, Jake's disappearance became a local legend. People would drive past that mysterious tunnel, laying flowers at its entrance, wondering what happened to the motorcycle enthusiast who vanished without a trace. Some claimed they could hear the distant sound of a motorcycle engine on quiet nights, echoing from somewhere beyond our world. Years passed, and while theories circulated about Jake's fate, no one ever discovered the truth about the tunnel that led to Cretania, or the man who accidentally crossed between worlds on a morning ride that changed his life forever. Some say on particularly foggy mornings, you can still see tire tracks leading into that tunnel, but none coming out.
Let me tell you about Terry, a guy whose love for cheese was unlike anything you've ever seen. I mean, we all enjoy a good slice of cheddar or a bite of brie, but Terry, he took it to a whole new level. Every morning, he'd start his day with cheese-filled omelets, his coffee breaks, cheese Danish, His friends would joke, "Terry, you're going to turn into a mouse one day." He'd just laugh and keep munching on his cheese sticks. His refrigerator looked like a dairy warehouse, with shelves stacked with everything from fancy French Roquefort to humble string cheese. He even planned his vacations around cheese. One year, it was Switzerland for the Emmental. Another year Italy for the Parmigiano Reggiano. His dating profile literally said, "Must love cheese as much as I do," which, let's be honest, was setting an impossibly high bar. But here's where things get weird. One morning, Terry woke up feeling different. He looked in the mirror and nearly fainted. Where his nose used to be was now a tiny pink snout. His ears had grown pointy and furry. And behind him, a long, thin tail. That's right, Terry had actually turned into a mouse. But you know what's funny? He wasn't even upset about it. In fact, he was thrilled. Now he could smell cheese from a mile away, and his new size meant that even a small piece of cheese could last him 4 days. These days, you can find Terry living his best life in an upscale cheese shop in downtown. The owner, an elderly lady who has a soft spot for mice, especially ones who can write cheese reviews with their tiny paws, lets him be the official cheese taster. He's become something of a local celebrity. The mouse with the most refined palate in town. The moral of the story: sometimes your greatest passion can completely transform you. In Terry's case, quite literally. And while most of us probably shouldn't eat cheese for every meal, unless you're prepared for some whiskers, it's kind of beautiful how Terry's obsession led him to his true form. So next time you're enjoying a piece of cheese, think of Terry, the man who loved cheese so much he became a mouse and couldn't be happier about it. Now that's what I call living your best life, one cheese wheel at a time. Let me tell you about the most incredible dream I ever had. You know those dreams that feel so real, you could swear they actually happened. This was one of them. It all started on a pretty rough day. I was standing at an ATM, trying to withdraw $20, when those dreaded words popped up: insufficient funds. My heart sank. I felt completely alone and broke, desperately needing that money. But then, something extraordinary happened. As I was about to hit the exit button and walk away with my tail between my legs, a strange message appeared on the screen. Do you want free money? Yes or no? I mean, who wouldn't click yes, right? So I did, and just like that, the machine started whirring, and out came $1,000. Just like that, I stood there, mouth hanging open, staring at the cash in my hands. Was this real? Was I going crazy? I immediately used it for rent, bills, and finally bought some decent groceries. 4 days, I was paranoid. Every phone call, every email, I thought it was the bank coming after me. But nothing happened. So I went back to that same ATM, and wouldn't you know it, the same message appeared. Another $1,000, just like that. This went on 4 months, then years, 20 years, to be exact. I'd hit up different ATMs multiple times a day, and my wealth just kept growing. The craziest part, the banks never questioned a thing. I even walked into my local branch to ask about making a deposit, cool as a cucumber, and they treated it like business as usual. I had everything: mansions, sports cars, private jets. I could feel the leather seats in my cars, smell the ocean breeze from my beachfront properties. I lived the kind of life most people only see in movies. My bank account had hundreds of millions of dollars. And then ... I woke up. Just like that. I was back in my bed, in my regular life. I walked to the ATM later that day, checked my balance, and there it was, $0. The crushing reality hit me hard. You know what's the worst part about dreams like these? It's not just losing the money or the lifestyle. It's that feeling of time passing, of living an entire life, building something amazing, only to have it slip through your fingers like sand. I can still feel it all, the wealth, the freedom, the security. Sometimes I find myself wishing I could just go back to sleep and live in that dream forever. But I guess that's the thing about dreams. They show us what we want most, even if it's just for a fleeting moment. Let me tell you about the peculiar tale of Mr. Picker, a man who simply couldn't keep his fingers still. In our little town of Fidgetville, everyone knew him as the fellow who just couldn't stop picking. You'd see him walking down Main Street, one finger buried deep in his nose, while another explored his belly button. The local children would giggle and point, but Mr. Picker didn't seem to mind. He'd just wave with his free hand. That is, if he had one available that wasn't busy picking something else. The townspeople would whisper among themselves, shaking their heads in disapproval. The local doctor even tried to help, offering Mr. Picker special gloves and fidget toys. But nothing seemed to work. He'd pick his nose while reading the morning paper, clean his toes during lunch at the park, and dig into his ears during evening conversations. The local school even had to create a special rule: no picking like Mr. Picker. But the strangest part of this story happened on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Mr. Picker was sitting on his favorite park bench, picking away as usual. He started with his nose, moved to his ears, then his toes, and his belly button. But this time, something was different. He started picking at his shoulder, then his knee, then his elbow. The children playing nearby watched in amazement as Mr. Picker seemed to be picking himself apart, bit by bit. First, his left shoe disappeared. Then his right hand started to fade away. He kept picking and picking, faster and faster, like a man possessed. The townspeople gathered around, watching in disbelief as Mr. Picker picked himself into nothing. Pop. Just like that, he vanished into thin air, leaving behind only his favorite picking spot on the park bench and a small sign that read, "Gone picking." To this day, no one knows exactly what happened to Mr. Picker. Some say he picked himself into another dimension. Others believe he finally turned into that monkey everyone warned him about. But one thing's for certain: in our town, whenever someone starts picking their nose, someone else is sure to warn them. Careful now. Remember what happened to Mr. Picker. And that's why, children, when your parents tell you to stop picking, you might want to listen. After all, you wouldn't want to pick yourself right out of existence, would you?